And I thought I'd ask you, you brought the labor exhibition to Spaces and I saw it there. I wondered, did you ever think of maybe bringing in music to that, say songs from the fields or harvest songs, which might have added to the overall experience of the idea of labor? That's one part of my question and just popped into my head really. The other thing is, how do your students respond when you work with students? How do students at that age respond to this whole idea of working with multiple kinds of arts?
Studied from a colonial institution that still sort of has disciplines that sort of rarely allow for crossovers. I mean, we still choose to study painting, sculpture, ceramics, or and of course crossovers are almost not possible when we are studying. And of course, I'm a trained painter, but then I've sort of chosen to sort of explore other mediums, and where I think Preeti rightly sort of pointed out, which is the idea of contemporary art is really about the contemporary. It's really not these various disciplines that should be constraining artists in a sense. So coming to the labor project, and of course the students' works that are up in Kochi right now. So in fact, the labor project did have a video of a group of women singing. Yes. And in fact, this particular edition of the Students' Biennale has an interesting body of work and a lot of musical work. So there's this one student who's actually a textile student, but then he's someone who writes songs for Ghana singers. And he's from North Madras, and his name is Valen. And so for this edition, he actually wrote a song about displacement, and which is a very real experience for him. I mean, he has grown up being displaced from different parts from the city, and right now he's living very far away from the city. So there is an interesting Ghana song, and hopefully we'll be bringing it to Chennai and maybe Spaces. And so I feel right now, even though the disciplines haven't really changed within the college as a space, I mean, yes, we all sort of artists in Chennai do come from institutions, and there is a sort of struggle having to deal with the idea of the institution, or having to deal with these mediums that we are constantly, I mean, in many ways we are also going back and forth with these mediums. But sometimes it works, sometimes these also sort of become barriers for us. So, but I feel increasingly, I mean, particularly I was very much growing up in this internet age and the cell phone age and all of that. And of course, students right now are also like, full into this, the social media and all of that. So their idea of interdisciplinary is more fluid, in the sense it's actually more transdisciplinary, I feel. I mean, they're able to understand, they're able to research, sort of articulate their research in interesting ways. And for them, these traditional mediums are really not holding them back. And that's quite interesting. Yeah.
In fact, this fluidity of, bringing all of these things together, music and dance and images and so on, onto one space, is best possibly exemplified in the performance piece, don't you think, performance art? Geeta, how do you respond to performance art? For instance, when somebody cooks and then is painting at the same time, and then is offering the food, and there's a certain kind of music, and there have been various such performances. How do you respond, and how do you think this takes the conversation ahead?
Thank you. Very interesting comments by all of them, and I think that's maybe we should also share it with people like Praveen, who've also been in this process of using the arts. About the silo art, I might just remind you that the Kochi Biennale represents the opening up of all these different spaces,
warehouses and all
the warehouses, and there you see the boundaries that you call. See, you have to have some boundaries, just like even though you don't seem to like your colonial baggage, you still have to have a language before you can learn to speak, before you can learn to curse, before you can learn to deny. And all those things are important. So I think one of the topics that you mentioned, this thing of how much freedom do we have as artists. I think this is perhaps the most vital issue that artists or creative people will be facing. When I spoke of Vasudev's and our generation, we were battling against this thing that we had to create everything from scratch, as it were, and yet the whole world was open for us. It was not life denying. But when you have these strictures, this fear that a cartoonist can be jailed, that you say something and it's on the media, I think it's wonderful to have media, but the media can also have a deadly impact. You might say with something within a context, and it can be blown completely out of context. So I think, if I might say, could we open up this thing about censorship and the artist, because this is the most crucial problem I think that we are facing today. I love going to these food shows, but it's also very commercial. And this is something that nobody seems to have touched upon, that since the days when I could go to a Vasudev and he could give me a drawing free, which was very nice, there's no question, but everyone says, it's not the artist, but the art gallery. I'm sorry to be knocking the gallery. I'm sure they're very important. It's like a midwife. You need to have a midwife. But the midwife has now become more important than the artist. Quite often, it's the gallery owner that is dictating the price, dictating the place where these, if you've seen some of the galleries in Delhi, they seem to be like fortresses. You need to have a sort of a pass to get in, because it's so expensive to even just buy a photograph. Somebody was telling me about very good photographer Ketaki Sheth, and her work, maybe a little larger than that, a photograph, brilliant, 2 lakhs. But out of the 2 lakhs, the gallery owner gets 1 lakh. So this is all about money, really, and I think that has also changed the way that artists and creative people, especially theatre people, and before you could have a play in a museum theatre, and it wouldn't cost so much. But it costs so much that people like me, who used to be very sort of biting, sharp critics, are no longer available at all, because it has to be a puff. And this is the other difference. You can't really have real feedback, because supposing you say something negative, I remember a time when there was this very talented but large actress amongst the Madras players, and I think I said a very innocent remark. She was large in every sense of the word, or something like that. And I had to grovel and apologize to the members of the Madras players. And of course, afterwards I felt bad for her, because in Chennai, I knew her mother, and she said, how could you do this, her daughter, and so on and so forth. But that's Chennai for you. Quite apart from that, it's no longer a question of being, you can't say anything without somebody else saying something quite negative about that. This polarization of our society, which is, I think, a deliberate feature of our government now. And I think that is scary. And it's no longer a question of boundaries, it's a question of, do we have the freedom to speak at all?
Taking the art to the public. Because 2-3 incidents that I have noticed have been extremely positive. I remember in the mid-80s, when Times of India turned 150 years old, they had asked all the artists of the country and to have an exhibition at the Victoria Terminus railway station. And it was the most fantastic event that ever happened in Bombay. Everybody. Huh? No, he was one of them, yeah. But like everybody who was anybody in the field of art, whether you are at the top of the heap or bottom, was exhibited on the railway station. And it was open for 2 weeks. and we were the photographers who were photographing the reactions of the people. And I think that such an experiment has happened after a very long time, and it happened in Chennai in the 2016 Photo Biennale, where the city of Chennai had, with the help of Max Muller and our friends and all, they had exhibitions all over the place. You know, I mean, I tell you that Pablo Bartholomeo's exhibition was in the corridor of the Louvre, in a movie theater, and it used to be jam-packed because people were wanting to see the pictures. You know, yeah, and it was in public places. It was in public places. It was in gardens. It was on metros. You know, and of course there were some galleries. You know, which are exhibited. I think that this whole thing about taking art to the public, what Nilima is also trying to do, is that how much is the artist willing to act? If an artist is performing on stage, in a wooden stage, fantastic lighting, will she also come and perform on the pavement? You know, will we as photographers, because I have done it, that will we as photographers exhibit in the best galleries around the world and also ready to have a street exhibition? You know, will we be ready to do that? Galleries have become very intimidating, as you see. You know, people are fearful to come inside. They just don't, I mean, the whole situation is such that you're intimidated of going inside. You know, and if we don't break that, and if we artists are not, and then of course the price. You know, and the gallery will always say that we are doing your publicity, we have the lights, electricity, air conditioning, everything, so they need to have their cut also. So there is one whole business side what we were talking about yesterday extensively.
Yes, exactly.
So that is one different thing, but I think that this whole Vasudev has started a movement in Bangalore where every Sunday, one Sunday in a month, all the artists come and paint in a park. And nobody can sell their work for more than 100 rupees. And initially it was very skeptical. First 3-4 months it was very skeptical. Now there's a huge crowd. You know.
But can you buy a Ram Vasudev for 100?
Yes. Please. Now 1,000. Huh? Now, but it started at very low.
There's a self-made drawing anywhere else.
Yeah.
Different, but at that place,
Yeah.
5 drawings, 1,000.
No, I'm just saying that you have a theatre, like for example when we had the Biennale and people came up to us and said that, you know, I mean, this is a fantastic photograph. He would be a bus conductor or somebody. He had no money, you know, and he would say, I wish I would have a print. So we made prints and gave it to them. You know, because why shouldn't they have it? Otherwise they only have paper cuttings and you can frame them and, you know. So I think it is also a whole issue of whether the artist, how much is he going to go forward to this situation, how much is he going to, you know, be. So this whole thing about working with the people and for the people is a very touchy subject, you know. And of course the most touchy subject now is censorship. Ask me, being a filmmaker, it is frightening to go to a censor office. Really. I mean, it is like if you go to the censor board office, first of all they think that you are a criminal. Yeah, otherwise, no, I mean, criminals have money also. You know, so that is taken for. But you go to the censor office and the smallest things, and you know who are on the censor board? People who have nothing to do. Because how can you see 3-4 films every day? You know, so there are housewives, and it is very strange that in the body of people who are watching, there has to be minimum 6 people. Out of that, 2 have to be women. And 2 have to be middle class women, not very wealthy, and of course they don't treat our buys and all who would like to go to see the movies. And then they make all these decisions. They put all the decisions, and if you say, no, I want my film to be not censored, then it will go to a revising committee. And in the revising committee, there is a rule that out of 6 members, 3 have to be women. And they have to be middle class women, and they need not be journalists or writers or poets or artists. They have to be ordinary housewives. No, the thing is, I agree with you. And the guys, no, so you will look at a painting, or you will look at, say, Chandra's performance. You know, if she was doing it today, you know, they would never, in Maharashtra, theatre has censorship. You have to take your script to the censor board first before you. It would have never been performed.
So we're actually touching upon some very sort of very different kinds of barriers in the art world, isn't it? The barrier of money, for instance, being able to afford it, accessibility. Where are you putting your paintings? And it's not, the whole what Navroz says about how intimidating art galleries are, and then of course the censorship, the barrier of censorship. But when you speak of low art and high art and removing those barriers, Navroz, you had something very interesting to tell me yesterday about Rajnikant and how you respond to Rajnikant.
I think he is extremely high art.
And he has very nice things to say about that horrible film Endiran also.
No, but
And
that
please,
is.
Please tell us, share with us.
No, I mean, that's beside the point. But I think that. Huh?
I hated it. I
that-
hated it.
Yeah, I also. Yeah.
Sitting here.
Huh? Very?
Endiran, yeah, very
No,
horrible.
I think that if you make a film so crazy like Endiran, first of all you have to think like that. No, whatever it is. No, whatever, yeah, or anything. Or if you see, if you want to. No, but listen, that is animation. This is all real life. So there's a big difference in animation. Nobody says anything about how outrageous the stories are in Mahabharata or Ramayana. That is accepted. But when we have our own Hanuman or somebody like Endiran, then we are all up in arms against him. So I feel that if you have to see, as I told you, film is such a collaborative effort. And in his films, in big films, I mean, thousands of people work, not few hundred.
But don't you think it's a religious experience for most?
Yeah.
Go there and you see your hero.
Of course. Of course it is. Of course. No, but I'm just saying that this whole thing about high art and low art is how much. First, you have to think, so you have to have such ideas. Then you have to write them down. So you have to have that skill. Then you have to translate it to the art director and to the animation and to the actor and to the lighting and to the cameraman and everything to produce few seconds of it.
But I think,
So,
but I think fascinating as this is, we are not addressing what Vasu wanted me to address. Because I wanted everyone to hear your enthusiasm about Rajnikant. But I thought one other thing that, the same thing, high art, low art, and how we tend to look at crafts, for instance, is not quite art enough. There's been a recent movement to recognize the worth of some of these things, and I've seen some fabulous pieces come out of quilting, out of needlepoint, out of embroidery, which are brilliant artworks, and they are sort of being slowly brought into the mainstream as well. And Krishnapriya, would you want to talk about that a little bit?
The institution. So the College of Fine Arts has a very interesting history. I mean, in fact, the Labour Project sort of looked at that history. So it starts as an industrial school, and so the idea of bringing in craft and working with craftsmen, and then also trying to revive or also create objects that can be consumed in a sense, and it has also played a crucial role in the architectural elements of the city and of course the country in a sense also. So, the College of Arts has this very interesting history of working with craft, and of course even when I was studying, this question of is art superior? I mean, this question of high art and low art has always been there, and of course, a lot of the students who've passed out of the Madras College are very much part of the Tamil film industry, which is a very big industry, and it has been very lucrative for a lot of the students to actually be, even when they're studying, they work in these, art departments, and they find a way of sustaining themselves also. So, so that way the college actually has a very interesting history. It's, of course, we have these iconic artists who've come out of the college, and and who fully embrace the idea of this superior artist, and then they've built these personalities and images of this artist, which is, of course, I think it's also interesting to look at how these images have been built. And when you think about the majority of the students, and this is not just the Madras school, it's also these other schools. I mean, the JJ school, for example, or I mean, schools across the country where a lot of the students actually do these different things, which is, I mean, one can say commercial or, I mean, but I think it's very interesting and very valuable. Of course, a lot of this is not documented, so one doesn't know. And it's also largely not considered as high art and sort of never given any importance, or authorship is never given to some of these works that come out in this nature. But that way, I think there is, if one was to document all of this, it could be quite interesting to look at how this is sort of happening. And I think it's still very much actively happening in these institutions across the country.
It's interesting, isn't it, that Indian art has traditionally not considered authorship very important, and possibly because of that, it has actually prioritized collaborations. There were hundreds of people working on brilliant sculptures or temples, and it wasn't important. So the boundaries that you speak of authorship were truly not there at that point of time, and I think it's interesting that maybe in some ways we are trying to go back full circle into that. Yeah. There's another sort of point that I wanted to make, and I'm going to ask you, Preeti, but anybody can, I mean, please feel free, any one of you, to respond to it. Is that when you put all of these things in a space, when you work with music and art, and you work with, say, found objects, and you have paintings, and you try to express all of this, you put everything together to express something. Thinkers and art thinkers and art critics have tried to explain this in postmodernist terms, and saying that this doesn't represent so much the thinking of the human eye or ear, so much as the thinking of the human mind. In other words, it's almost like a stream of consciousness approach to art. Is that a way of looking at it? Does that make sense for you, Preeti?
Well, I think essentially any kind of coming together of different practices and mediums can only have a certain impact or a validity, which may be a very time-bound validity. You know, it may be a situational thing that makes it come together. If we're talking about censorship today, and if no one has said anything about the Casteless Collective being banned on the beach, or that Loyola College apologized for the students' art, it may be a certain point in time which requires a coming together of various kinds of practice to sort of push that point. And at the end of the day, I think it really matters about what kind of a journey that practitioners are on together, and what kind of a shared reality that you're in touch with and responding to. Which brings some sort of a coherence into it, and any kind of purpose, if you may call it that. Yes, there doesn't have to have a purpose beyond its own thingness. A painting doesn't have to be anything other than that, or but we've been through these movements in history. We've been through the Dada, we've been through various things, but these practitioners also were people working together in something of a community, and I think that perhaps now is a moment when that kind of a community could happen across disciplines. But for the largest time, I remember in Paneer's home one evening listening to Sadanand saying, sorry, but the last 30 years or so has not seen a community happen in any of these practices. We were talking about artists at that time, but we were talking about this just before. But it takes a certain coming together, maybe a stake of sorts, which begins to have something of a constant sort of a movement of sorts. I would ask you guys to respond.
I remember that when I finished my education and I went to Bombay, because that was the only place one could go to after finishing school in Pune, and there was the new cinema scene happening, the new theatre was happening, and that time I remember in Bombay at least, people from English theatre, Gujarati theatre, Marathi theatre, they were all very active theatres, and Parsi theatre, were all together. We were partying together, we were meeting together, we were going to help in each other's plays. And of course, the common enemy was Bollywood. That time it was not known as Bollywood, But advertising agency people were also helping in this, because many of them were acting in those plays. And then we had this institution like Bhulabhai Desai, where all of us used to meet and exchange ideas. And Akbar Padamsee, who got a Nehru Fellowship, and he didn't want the money, but he started a workshop collective. So from which money called Film Duvida emerged, which I was the cinematographer. So we did work a lot with each other tremendously, I think a little bit even into fashion, because fashion was just starting. Jeannie Navroji and Zeenat Aman and all these people were just, they were all getting to be big. And I saw the rift coming when big money entered this field, in the 80s, when multinational companies came and everything needed to be sponsored or everything needed to be, then everything became compartmentalized. Everything became separate, I mean, Alec Padamsee was at a level of making theatre where he would need 50 lakhs for production. Sunil Shanbag would probably need 50,000 for production. So everything started to split and to go in its different ways. So I think that in a way, as you said, you can't afford it. I know that Bhimsen Joshi or somebody comes to Bangalore to sing, the ticket is 2,000 rupees. Too bad. People can't afford it. It's as simple as that. So it is the commercial angle of this. Once your art exchanges anything for money, it is partly commercial. I'm not saying that it is not, because artist also has to live and whatever it is. But this elitism in everything, I think according to me, according to what history that I have lived through in India, is, Chandralekha was in Chennai, but her effect was all over the country. That's what I mean. It was not that she was only in Chennai. And I would say that Cholamandal is like Amul in Gujarat, It only happened over here, but it had an impact all over the place. And Amul has only happened in Gujarat, not in any other state, though it's such a successful model, But we were all everybody was, I was living in Ahmedabad, but I was very friendly with Chandra, who was in Madras, We could barely meet, but there were ideas, there were telephone calls, and, it was a very, I think it was a really wonderful situation at that time. Then, so then I think my reading is that when the very big money came and very exclusive galleries started, and now, for example, cities don't have a place like Jahangir Art Gallery, where everybody meets, and Triveni in Delhi. No other city has got a place where artists can come and meet and just sit down and chat, and they don't have to get drunk and they don't have to listen to loud music. And, isn't it? The public space itself is not like Samovar. Who has not been to Samovar? From the biggest guys to the smallest guys.
So we come back to the idea of community that Preeti spoke of, which is so important. Preeti, you spoke of a moment in time, a push that could possibly make that happen. And I was thinking actually this whole thrust on feminism has seen that push towards, bringing to the fore the arts that I mentioned, like embroidery or needlepoint or crochet, which were often relegated as, feminine crafts. And so a similar sort of push might actually result in the sort of community that Navroz also speaks of, when the barriers might not be so important as the works that emerge from working jointly, collaboratively. On that note, I think I'll open it up to questions and answers.